Last year in 2020, Adam, Lee, and I completed a 6-day road trip to Oklahoma, where we rode part of Route 66 and all of the Talamina Scenic Byway. We all enjoyed the trip and wondered where we would go next. Would 2021 have us traveling to the mountains, or maybe to the ocean? Could we do both? We finally decided to ride to the Outer Banks of North Carolina and then cross the mountains of Virginia and West Virginia to the bourbon-rich land of Kentucky, where Adam and I would visit several distilleries. So please follow along as we revisit portions of our trip. Day 1. Lee and I met at a local gas station at 5 a.m. since we had a 650-mile day ahead of us. We were meeting Adam closer to his home, but that was still 3 hours away. As we headed east, we could see rain clouds looming and hoped we would not get wet this early into the trip. The early morning ride gave us the time to reflect on last year's trip and contemplate on how this one would go. Met Adam at a gas station and topped off our fuel. We stood around for a few minutes talking, which turned out to be a mistake. As we pulled out of the gas station, it began to rain, making it a wet ride to our next stop, Savannah, Harley-Davidson. By the time that we arrived at Savannah Harley-Davidson, we were mostly dry. Well, all except our boots. We walked around and looked at the new motorcycles, along with the old truck they had parked right outside their front door. We took the time to stretch our legs as the next planned stop, Southern Hops Brewing, was 2.5 hours away.
We feel so blessed. We are still here with our music. We never would have believed it. Back in the days, 15 years ago, and here we go again now. Yeah.
We were just some kids looking up to the sky with the sound of the radio, saying yes we'll never die. When we started to play, didn't know what to do. Just a feeling, maybe we found what we were looking for. Just a feeling, it's the way it was meant to be. 'Cause here and now, yeah, that's who we wanna be. We feel alive, still there like a family. We couldn't think it, we couldn't hide it, singing along through the years. 'Cause here and now, that's who we are. There were so many times we were so close to giving up. It's a kind of American.
We stopped for lunch at the Southern Hops Brewing Company, and since it was about an hour past lunchtime, we were all hungry. Southern Hops had an excellent variety of cold beverages and food. I would suggest stopping there if you are ever in Florence, South Carolina. After lunch, we visited Blackjack Harley-Davidson before getting back on the road. Although we looked around for a while, we kept our eyes on the time. It was becoming late in the afternoon, and we still had another 3 hours before arriving at our final destination.
We never go away. We will
Day 2. This was another early morning for the three of us as we had a 2-hour ride to catch the 8 a.m. ferry from Cedar Island to Ocracoke. Oh, did I mention we had to be there at least 30 minutes early to keep our reservations. Once on the ferry, we had time to stretch our legs, talk, or even sleep, as it was about a 2.5-hour crossing. We had to keep a strict schedule this morning as we had a second 1-hour ferry to catch between Ocracoke and Hatteras, and it was on a first come, first served basis. Riding on Ocracoke and later on Hatteras was a different experience. While you typically did not see the Atlantic Ocean due to the dunes, the sand came right up to the road and onto the road in some places. It kept us focused as sand and motorcycles do not mix well together. While on Ocracoke, we made 2 mistakes. The first was skipping an early lunch for a late one. The second was stopping to get drone footage. By the time we made it to the Ocracoke to Hatteras ferry, there was a line of cars. It looked as if we were going to have to wait on multiple ferries before we could get across. After waiting for about 20 minutes, we found out that they let motorcycles skip the line. It led to a later lunch than we had planned, but hey, we were on a motorcycle trip. Does time really matter? After exiting the ferry, we immediately stopped at the wrecked Tiki Bar. There was a line of people, so it took a while to get our food. However, the food was good and the beverages were cold. If you are ever on Hatteras, look it up. You will not be disappointed. After lunch, it was all about getting to Kill Devil Hills, as we wanted to visit the Wright Brothers National Memorial before they closed.
Very easy. Maybe in our world here, there live a happy little mountain.
made it to the Wright Brothers National Memorial with about an hour before they closed. The gate attendant let all three of us in on my America the Beautiful Park Pass. Otherwise, there would have been a nominal fee for each of us. It was here on December 17, 1903, when Orville made the first successful flight of 120 feet. By the end of the day, Wilbur would fly 852 feet. Being a former aircraft mechanic in the Air Force, I could not go to the Outer Banks without seeing where human flight began. And so ended our day, with a short ride to the hotel and supper. Day 3. The sun was already up by the time we started packing the bikes. It was going to be mainly a travel day, and the only real goal was to make it across Virginia and into West Virginia. The trip was only 377 miles if we took the most direct route, hence the late start. However, we did not. We made sure to include some sightseeing stops along the way. About lunchtime, we stopped at Colonial Harley-Davidson, where we were looking for something to eat. The staff there suggested the gas station / restaurant next door, but we were skeptical, as a place called Sheets certainly was not a good place to eat. However, we did. The food wasn't bad, but it was nothing to write home about.
Save me from everything. Tell me where to find my way. I'm just looking for something I can make in another day. 'Cause I'm all done fading away. 'Cause I'm all done. This is what I do, I just keep running. Always working fast and hard, never thinking about now. Believing I'm happy thanks to all the things that I have to try. I wanted peace, I wanted to be fine. I wonder why I cannot just sit for a while. I really want to see what it looks like. To have a moment I know that would be mine. Would be mine. Save me from everything. Tell me where to find my way. I'm just looking for something I can make it another day. 'Cause I'm all done fading away. 'Cause I'm all done. This is why I know I just keep running. If I survive, if I am strong, why do I feel I'm never close? But I'll survive and I'll be strong.
Remember how I said we worked in some sightseeing stops? Well, Appomattox Courthouse National Historical Park was one of them. On July 21st, 1861, the first major land battle of the Civil War, the First Battle of Bull Run, or as the Confederacy called it, First Manassas, took place on a farm owned by Wilmer McLean. By 1863, McLean had had enough and moved his family to a dusty crossroads called Appomattox Courthouse. As fate would have it, on April 9, 1865, Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in McLean's front parlor. After the war, McLean could say that the war started in his front yard and ended in his front parlor.
Do you like that? Something's getting in the way. Something's just about to break. I will try to find my place in the diary of James. So tell me how we should be. Try to find out what makes you tick as I lie down. So rancid, do you like that?
Day 4. This was another travel day, with us needing to get through West Virginia and into Kentucky. The most direct route for this day was 281 miles. While we did make a few stops along the way, we did stick to the most direct route. This morning started off as a dreary, foggy morning, but at least it wasn't raining. That would eventually change. Our first stop of the day was the New River Gorge Bridge. This is the bridge that is featured on the 2006 West Virginia quarter. The bridge was completed in October of 1977, becoming the longest steel span in the Western Hemisphere. We attempted to view the bridge from below, but the fog prevented us from doing so. It began to drizzle on us, but we pressed on anyway. However, it wasn't long before we had to stop and gear up in our rain suits.
As I pose to brace for it, waiting out, I can feel the current. Close my eyes, but the wind never breaks on me. Rising up, it's rising up, rising up, it's rising up, rising up, it's rising up, rising up, it's rising up to take me underneath the pressure. I can feel it closing and it takes me, takes me, takes me, takes me
For lunch, we stopped in Huntington, West Virginia at the Huntington Ale House near Marshall University. Lee ordered the BLT, which came with about half a pound of bacon on it. I would recommend this restaurant as the food was good and the beverages cold. After lunch, we stayed in our rain suits as there was more rain moving through the area. Just like our trip in 2020, we were riding through the remnants of a tropical system. This time the remnants were from Hurricane Ida. But we rode anyway as we had many more miles to cover.
It's rising up, rising up, it's rising up, rising up, it's rising up, rising up, it's rising up, and takes me underneath the pressure, and it pulls me deeper. Takes me, takes me, takes me, takes me down.
As we approached Lexington, Kentucky, Lee split off and headed to the hotel as he had some laundry to do, while Adam and I visited our first distillery of the trip. We arrived at Hartfield & Company Distillery about 15 minutes before they closed, but the friendly staff showed us around anyway. At the time of our trip, it was the only distillery in Bourbon County, Kentucky. After leaving Hartfield & Company, it was straight to the hotel to dry out from the day of riding in the rain. Day 5. It was distillery day and we were going to be visiting Wilderness Trail and Maker's Mark. Adam and I left the hotel just about daybreak and the weather was still a little wet. We left Lee behind as he was going to a local Harley shop and then traveling north on his own. It would just be Adam and I for the remainder of our trip. We arrived at Wilderness Trail Distillery before our tour. We took time to get a bird's eye view of the distillery and surrounding property. Once inside, we saw some fermenting mash, the stills they use, the barreling process, and a barrel house, also called a rick house. We also got to taste White Dog whiskey right off of the still. We finished the tour with a small tasting. Overall, we had a great time. After Wilderness Trail, we traveled a few miles away to the Maker's Mark Distillery. Our tour group was a little larger than what Adam and I had experienced at the previous distillery. There were a few areas closed off and we could only look in through the windows. I'm not sure if that was standard practice or because of COVID. We were able to see the barreling process and another rick house that had been dug into the side of a hill. We also learned how the distillery adds French oak staves to fully matured Maker's Mark bourbon to create Maker's Mark 46. Again, we ended the tour with a small tasting, followed by Adam and I dipping our own bottles into the signature red wax. After the two distillery tours, we used backcountry roads to make our way south, eventually ending up on I-75. The rest of the day was dedicated to traveling south, so we would not have as far to travel on our last day. We made it into Tennessee and through Knoxville. We continued south, eventually stopping in Athens, Tennessee. Although it was our last night on our trip, we did not do anything crazy. We settled for dinner at a Mexican restaurant and went to bed on time. After 5 days on the road, traveling hundreds of miles at a time, it was nice to settle in at a decent hour. Also, we wanted to get an early start, hoping to get through Atlanta before traffic got too bad. Day 6, our final day. Again, we were on the road about sunup. It was a beautiful sunrise, and it made us forget about the traffic nightmare we had ahead of us. Again, this was going to be another boring day, as the only goal was to simply make it home.
Oh, can't you see we're running out of time? You're gonna lose your mind if you think you're doing fine. You can't describe it yet, but something is wrong. Where are your dreams now, and why don't you feel strong?
As we neared Atlanta, traffic came to a stop. We began to question if we made a mistake in our planning. However, as we inched closer and closer to the city, the traffic opened up, allowing us to enter the HOV lane. We were able to cruise through downtown Atlanta without any issue.
Your promises. bunch of us just pretend to be alike. Yeah, yeah. Every day, every night you try to find yourself. Don't live your life as someone else. Can't you see we're running out of time? Gonna lose your mind if you think you're doing fine. Tell me, why do you break all of your promises? I see this emptiness inside of you. Is this your way after all? Don't let them make you feel small. You know these dreams are not yours, and we're running out of time. Don't you understand? Just stop to run away. You never feel the same when you find your way. Now that you understand, just stop to run away. You never feel the same when you find your way.
We eventually made it to Tipton Harley-Davidson, as this was our separation point. From here, Adam would go east and I would go west. After we went our separate ways, I could see a storm brewing to the east and knew Adam was in for a wet ride. As I continued along, I reflected on this trip and life in general. Too many times we get caught up with work and responsibilities and all of the other things that life throws at us. There are times that we must get away and let the cares of life go. Taking a multi-day motorcycle trip is one great way to do that.